Hi, you're watching us on NewsX and NewsX YouTube. I'm Rishabh Gulati. I have my colleague Gauri with us, and we are examining the very expectant reality that the country of Pakistan will be bankrupt in 1 year's time. Here's Gauri, let's have a look at the mathematics. The mathematics, if we begin with the current status of what's happening in Pakistan, have a look at this. So this is the current status of $17 billion, which is the forex reserves of Pakistan. This relates, if you want a comparative term, India's forex reserves are about $400 billion. The Chinese forex reserves are about $1 trillion. So Pakistan has currently $17 billion of forex reserves. In January of 2019, they only had about $8.5 billion. That's worth about 7 weeks of imports. So this has become a $17 billion figure simply because they've got about $8 billion, $8.5 billion to be exact, in SOS loans. 4.5 billion have come from China, and 2 billion have come from Saudi Arabia, and 2 billion have come from the UAE. So you add the 8.5 billion, and now Pakistan is sitting on 17 billion. Now this is the expected current account deficit that Pakistan is going to be bitten by over the next 1 year. The current account deficit is the loss they make in trade every year. Now the Pakistani current account deficit last year was $18.5 billion. This time around, Imran Khan has banned the import of foreign cheese, and let's say in the best case scenario, this has some impact. So there are two blows to Pakistan's current account deficit. Number one is the 200% import duty that India has put. Now India and Pakistan have a 4,000 crore odd annual trade. The 200% import duty is going to levy more stress on the Pakistani current account deficit, especially in their cement export sector. So let's say that the Pakistanis manage to save some money by not having cheese and expensive clothes coming from outside, and import intrigue reduces that front. A large part of the current account deficit of Pakistan, just like ours, is inelastic. It's oil. You can't do anything about it. You're dependent on oil revenue. So in the best case scenario, in a really good case scenario, let's say Pakistan trims that current account deficit from current $18.5 billion to $15 billion. So they're sitting on 17 billion. $15 billion per year is going to be the current account deficit. Now have a look at how that's going to play out. These are the three loans I told you about. 4.5 billion have come from China, 2 billion have come from Saudi Arabia, and $2 billion from the UAE.
So if they have been given these loans, then they have to pay them back.
The problem with loans is it's not income. This is any loan that you get, you have to pay it back. And the problem then comes, of course, is when you start paying it back. So let's look at the cost of those $8.5 billion at an interest rate. They've been given at an interest rate of 3.18% per year, which is a low interest rate. But even then, that's a payment cost over the next 10 years of $240 million per year. So this is 0.24 billion, 240 million is what's it going to cost by the Pakistanis to pay back the SOS loans. So these are the SOS Save Our Soul loans that they've got in the past few months from these three countries. Okay, so that the cost is going to be. So you started at $17 billion, $15 billion expected 1 year current account deficit, 240 million a year is the returnment of the SOS loans. Now, if you look at CPEC, now the CPEC projects are worth $60 billion, of which 2/3, about 66% are power projects. Now, those power projects are Chinese equity investment into Pakistan. It's not debt, it's equity. So it's not a loan, it's an investment. But that investment has been guaranteed at a 27% return over 10 years. So the Pakistanis in their contract have guaranteed that these Chinese will be making up to 27% return on their investment over 10 years. So that is about $12 billion. So around $40 billion of equity, you're guaranteeing a $12 billion total over, let's say 10 or let's say 20 years also, you have to pay it back. That's $600 million per year that you need to guarantee to pay that back. So this then adds up. If you add this to the CPEC loan, so that was the equity part.
Correct.
Here is the actual loans. Now there are two kinds of loans that have come under CPEC. The subsidized rate loans.
And there are the normal rate.
Yeah, so the subsidized rate is at 2%. So $6 billion of this subsidized loan, starting from 2021, it is due back. Over 25 years, that's $300 million or $0.3 billion a year that is going to cost the Pakistanis. Then there are the non-subsidized normal rate loans, which are at 5%. That's almost $10 billion. They need to be paid back over 10 years. That's an extra
another $1.2
billion per year. That is going to cost the Pakistani foreign exchange. Then the private companies in China have also given loans. These are the government loans.
Okay.
So the private sector loans from China, $3 billion, they are between 8 to 12%. So if you average it at 10%, is going to cost over the next 10 years $400 million. So if you look at your EMIs are going to be about $35 million a month. So you're looking at $400 million a year is going to cost the Pakistani economy.
And keeping in mind its current...
So if you total this all up, $17 billion was the current forex reserve.
Yeah.
$15 billion is the estimated current account deficit. So 17 minus 15 leaves you with $2 billion. Then you look at the $240 million is going to cost you to service the SOS loans. The 600 million or $0.6 billion is going to cost you to service the equity investments in which returns of 27% have been guaranteed. You further add the loans that have been given at subsidized rates, loans that have been given at normal rates, and loans that have been given by the Chinese companies.
Sector.
At about this point, you hit a negative $740 million, so $0.74 billion. So you're looking at within 1 year's time, Pakistan getting into a zone where they are hitting a negative $740 million, and that is a bankrupt state, literally bankrupt. And this is the concept of a debt trap that the Pakistanis have not been aware of. Loans are not income generating. So the Pakistani economy, by this metric and having to pay off the interest of the SOS loans, pay off the CPEC projects, buy their petroleum from abroad. And the tragedy in all of this is the counter logic applies that when you're taking loans and you're growing your infrastructure, that your GDP will go up and your trade revenues will go up. So let's say you build the CPEC project, the trade revenues will go up. The problem is the main entry port to CPEC is the port of Gwadar. The port of Gwadar, as per the CPEC agreement, for 43 years, by the time the port of Gwadar finishes its license from China, I'll be in my 80s. For 43 years, Pakistan has given a free trade entry to China. So China will not be paying any import-export duties on trade that they conduct from Gwadar. So the logic that if you build the infrastructure, your actual
it's a debt trap basically.
The trade revenues, so the debt trap's already happened. So but you're hoping that your trade revenues increase. So the trade revenues increase, your current account deficit will fall. But it can't fall because the Chinese will be conducting trade without paying any import-export duties at all. Now what happens? There are other countries that have gotten into the same debt trap. Sri Lanka was one example. They had an $8 billion loan due to China, for which they have now ceded the entire port of Hambantota, one of their biggest ports.
Exactly.
And 15,000 acres of Sri Lankan territory, which has been given to the Chinese in a 99-year lease. For the next 100 years, the Chinese will be running the Sri Lankan port of Hambantota. The Tajiks had the same problem of a Chinese debt trap. They had to settle it by handing over 1,200 square kilometers of Tajik territory. They literally gave away, they sold their land to clean the debts with China. And that's what you can expect that Imran Khan is going to have to do next year once Pakistan goes bankrupt. You can't keep taking more loans. So once you go bankrupt, you're going to have to be handing over Pakistani territory, Pakistani ports, Pakistani assets will all be owned by the Chinese.
So Rishabh, my question is, how much of this is a problem for India vis-a-vis China? Because China is trying to encircle
for Pakistan. They need to figure out this problem. We don't have this problem. I'm not saying we are the rosiest forex picture, but we had our desperate straits in 1991. We moved beyond them and haven't looked back. So for 30 years, we haven't had to look back. So our forex reserves in 1991 were down to 14 weeks. So that's 3 months. So
it's deep trouble for Pakistan.
So Pakistan, this is basically an explanation of all the things, all the loans that Pakistan, this engineering that they're doing, take money from here, pay it off there. You know, it's called recycling of money, round tripping of money, all these languages that are used in Ponzi schemes, Pakistan is involved in right now. It's not going to last them more than 1 year. In a year's time, they're going to be bankrupt, and you're going to be seeing that either they'll be handing over their ports and large projects directly over to the Chinese, which means the Chinese will own them and run them, or they will be ceding territory. And the territory, the only concern for India is the territory that they might cede. More of it is likely to be in places like Gilgit-Baltistan, which is of course claimed by us and currently under Pakistani occupation. So that was an examination of how very realistically Pakistan is going to go bankrupt in 1 year's time. If you've been watching this on YouTube, do leave your comments and share this video. Thanks for watching.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.